It's Taco Tuesday. Trump always chickens out. Taco. And as expected, Trump tacoed. Let's get into it.
Brand new here. I see that's his 4:09 p.m. So okay.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it just came on.
Great. Let's see what it says together. Based on the fact that the government of Iran is seriously fractured, not unexpectedly so, and upon request of Field Marshal Aslam Munir, that's of Pakistan, and Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif of Pakistan, we have been asked to hold our attack on the country of Iran until such time as their leaders and representatives can come up with a unified proposal. I have therefore directed our military to continue with the blockade and in other respects remain ready and able, and we will therefore extend the ceasefire until such time as their proposal is submitted and discussions are concluded one way or the other. Okay. What is today? You know what? Taco Tuesday again.
It is.
As it turns out, there's something special about this day. That can't be viewed as any way except for we blinked. Wow, that's you're watching this live, folks. There's a lot of things, and I'll continue to show you some of the things we're about to. But that can't be viewed in any way except for a defeat on our side. That's an embarrassment. We definitely blinked and backed down, and to say until they come up with a proposal. I mean, what kind of stuff? They're unequivocal on what their proposal is. It's not changed at all. It's not going to change right now. And so the idea that we're waiting for them to come up. When was the last time you ever saw President Trump says, you know what? I'll tell you what, we're going to give you time to do it. You guys don't have your stuff together. We'll pause off on here because we're just good guys. And we're all about trying to help you out. Obviously, he never does that. Anytime President Trump, I mean, you go back through his entire history, you go back through the art of the deal, you go back through everything he's done. He said, you see weakness on your other side, you exploit it, you drive a hole in it, and you just press hard until you get what you want. You never let up off the gas. Therefore, this means that he realized that we were in a losing position. Now, I'm okay with that because.
Yes, I was half expecting bombs to start falling today, honestly, but it looks like Trump chickened out. So we are back in the holding pattern. In the Strait of Hormuz being closed, that's slowly killing the world economy, and Trump having no way out. He escalates, the entire Gulf goes up in flames. If he surrenders, he's finished politically immediately. He has no way out.
It would have been disastrous for him to go forward. If he had pushed a bad position, maybe also part of that art of the deal is that he realizes that don't push down on a losing proposition. Don't double down on it because it's just going to cost you more. I mean, this is a good time for some of that business acumen to start playing in to say, hey, we've lost so far a lot of stuff. Let's don't lose even more. Some of the bigger issues involved with that is not just the assets lost, but with the ammunition that we've expended. We are dangerously low on the categories of ammunition that matter the most in our national security capabilities. The offensive missiles, the JASMs, the SM-2s, SM-3s, and several other categories, SM-6s, of course, the Tomahawk cruise missile. On the defensive side, the PAC-3s, the THAAD missiles, the ammunition for the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 systems in Israel. These are all running really low. You ramp this back up again with no prospect to end, and we could be setting ourselves up for either exhausting our missiles and not being able to defend ourselves from the incoming missiles, and then not being able to do any damage if you can't bomb them into submission. If you used all your stuff, what are you going to do then? See, that's one of my big problems that we haven't done so far is that we don't ever do the what happens next thing, and what if this doesn't work doesn't seem to enter into the thinking before we start. Although maybe this is an example of it. Maybe we are finally starting to say, hey, sir, maybe the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, maybe Admiral Cooper, I don't know if Pete Hegseth is squared up enough to be able to figure this out, but who knows? Maybe he is. Maybe altogether they said, sir, we just can't do this. We don't have the assets to do it. And if they don't surrender, if they don't give in, and every indication is that they won't, then we're going to run out of ammunition and we're not going to be able to compel them. That's one level. By itself, that's enough already to say don't.
Yeah, it's good if Trump is recognizing reality, and that is a possibility. Yeah, it's impossible to know what's going through Trump's head at this point. He must be under so much stress. I'm worried that some officials might actually not be telling him the truth, and he might, because they're afraid of his reaction. I've heard reports of that. Hopefully that's not the case.
Don't do this. But then the other one is a little bit bigger here, is that if you start going down that path, they have already very clearly said they are going to retaliate in kind. And as a matter of fact, Gary, if you can put up that full screen there of the IRGC leader, they were very explicit on this. He said, this is a little over an hour ago, I think a couple of hours now. Everyone must leave the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, and Kuwait immediately. Sailors aboard all ships in the Arabian Gulf must also prepare to evacuate their vessels. This is especially urgent for ships near the Strait of Hormuz, and there are hundreds of them trapped inside there, which will be destroyed first. Time is running out. So the Iranian side, unambiguously, this is the spokesman, Alpha Car for the IRGC. If you start attacking us, the ships in the Gulf are going to be flamed up first. That's the first things to hit. And then he said, everyone must leave. He didn't say if you're in a military installation or if you're in an oil facility. He said everyone must leave immediately. That to me is pretty clear.
This is very should be very scary. It means Iran fully intended to make the Gulf go up in flames. If the war had started again, they would have attacked everything: oil infrastructure, desalination plants. It would have been like we wouldn't have any oil from the Gulf for the next 3 years. It would have been bad. And what I'm worried about is nothing's changed. Trump is still in the losing position of the Strait of Hormuz closed, and now no oil going out because of his. He added his oil embargo on Iran on top of it. And so it's actually even worse now than at the beginning of the war in terms of amount of oil leaving the region. And that is just, the pressure now is just starting to hit the global economy, and it's just going to grow and grow and grow. And what's he going to do? Is he going to surrender to Iran, which is what's necessary to end this without a catastrophe for the global economy? Or is he going to escalate and the entire world gets fucked? Let's wait and see.
That they mean business when they say they're going to hit desalination facilities, because that's the only thing that would affect literally the entire population. You've heard Professor Morandi on our show very unequivocally said if you threaten our existence by hitting all of our energy sources and bridges and all the things that President Trump claimed and threatened that he would hit with, then you're going to find out that there's real problems here, because we're going to reciprocate the existential threat to all of your neighbors in the region, to all of your allies. And I think that they absolutely meant that. And so that warning there was a very clear case. So hopefully that's another thing that maybe got President Trump thinking, just starting this is no good. So now we've got two major reasons not to go through with this. One is our own capacity, because there's no reason to think that they would give in now when they haven't before. We don't have enough ammunition to go more than a few months, and maybe not even that far, maybe like 5-6 weeks of more heavy bombardment. And then what? What if we run out or nearly out? And then you have to just stop with abject failure. That's enough by itself. But then you have this other one on top of it, and that has.
Maybe Trump is afraid of that, afraid we'll actually run out of ammunition before we get Iran to surrender. And at least by delaying the start of the bombings, he can maybe bring in a few more assets to the region and build up a few more bombs. Or he's just in a losing hand. His presidency was finished the instant he bombed Supreme Leader.
Catastrophic events. Right now, it's a political decision. You can make a political decision not to go forward with this. You can make another political decision to come to some kind of an agreement that we both can live with. Everybody will paint it up as a success on their side, and everybody will have lost something. But maybe there's just still a chance to get those straits opened up. Now then, that's a political decision that can restart the flow of oil as soon as the political decision is made. Now, there's a lot of systematic problems that I've already told you about that are going to have to unwind, that it's going to take literally months. Even if a political decision is made to open the strait back up, it's going to take months to unwind this. We've already got problems baked in, probably at least have a recession already, but that is still better than the alternative, which is by launching an offensive operation, which then causes the Iranian side to retaliate the way they said. Now you have a physical disruption. Now it's no longer a political decision that you can just turn on literally on a dime, as you saw graphically exemplified in this very show. But that we just turned it off on a political decision right there. If the bombs start falling and destroying infrastructure, however, Iranian oil infrastructure, Iranian energy, Qatar.
It'll stop mattering whether the Strait of Hormuz is open or not. Hey, maybe that's Trump's strategy. If he bombs the hell out of the region and everything is destroyed, then Iran's control of the Strait of Hormuz stops mattering. But yeah, the world will be completely fucked by that point, even if Iran surrenders afterwards.
Bahraini, UAE, etc., all of them, Saudi Arabian. Now that you have catastrophe, because it's going to take probably half a year to multiple years in some cases to get all that damage done. And the global economy, there's no way to replace that much lost production. And it would cause serious, serious problems. There's no question about that. So And actually one more person I want to take a look at here. And that is Abbas Araghchi, because he made another comment here I think it's important to point out. Gary, if you can toss that one up. He said blockading Iranian ports is an act of war and thus a violation of the ceasefire. Striking a commercial vessel and taking its crew and hostage is even a greater violation. Iran knows how to neutralize restrictions, how to defend its interests, and how to resist bullying. That one was today at 2:15 p.m. So you see they've been building this up all during the afternoon. And where this was going and where it wasn't going from the Iranian side. Now I want to show you just real quick here what Jack Keane was saying. He's probably crying right now. If we had a secret camera that could go find Jack Keane, Mark Levin, Lindsey Graham, they may even be all huddled together and just crying right now. They're angry and they're throwing stuff around. They're probably already in a car heading over to the White House to try and beg Trump to do something different. Here's what they're going to ask for.
We have twice the capability on the U.S. side in the theater now than when we started the war. We have never given up bringing in additional assets to assist with the execution of our wartime objectives. The Israelis, who had some ammunition shortages, have full magazine depth now. So if we go back to combat operations, they are going to be absolutely full throttle and considerably more dramatic than anything the Iranians have experienced, to include all the targets the president is talking about and then some.
You know, when I hear stuff like that, I just got to think, what in the hell are you thinking about? And why aren't you thinking? There are already ramifications to this thing unfolding and manifesting right now. It's no longer theoretical. It's no longer, well, if we don't get this wrapped up quick, then the stuff is already starting to materialize. And that's all over the place. I mean, there's problems in Asia. I actually just had lunch today with a friend of America, a diplomat, whom I'll not name here for obvious reasons. But it's a good friend of America's in Asia. And they said, listen, we're already starting to have some problems. In fact, in the news, you've seen in South Korea, they are on basically government required measures to use less fuel. So they're saying, all right, everybody who has a license plate that has the number ending in 0 to 5, you should only drive on even number days. Everybody else, and the other one from 6 on up to 9, you should drive only in the odd days, etc. It's not mandated, but apparently people in South Korea and Asia cooperate to their benefit. They don't have to be made to do it. But the bottom line is that they're already implementing measures because they're suffering right now. The last boat that left the day before this war started from the Persian Gulf before the strait closed arrived yesterday, I think, actually, in Malaysia, if I'm not mistaken. That was the last one. So now.
All right, what's going on, everyone? So a lot to get into today.
This is for a perspective of more an average pro-Trump, pro-U.S. military guy onto this latest ceasefire extension.
As President Trump just announced that the United States is extending the ceasefire with Iran indefinitely. Not 1 week, not 2 weeks, but until a deal is reached, which could be a while. I mean, this might be the new status quo. Just long-term ceasefire with Iran. We've got a blockade in effect. We're seizing their ships around the world, and we're going to work towards a deal over the coming weeks, months, and years. Now, importantly, this came after Iran announced that they would not be going to Pakistan to meet with Vice President Vance and the U.S. delegation. And just a couple days after, and this one's flying under the radar. I don't know why, but we're going to link all the sources here and we'll run through it. The head of the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency says that Iran has expanded their war aims because they now understand how much influence they have over the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes, they've expanded. I don't know if I think it's ever since we bombed the supreme leader, they've basically had the same position, which is they need to inflict a loss on President Trump, the president that bombed their supreme leader, their pope. And yes, compared to when the negotiations were happening before, I mean, it's really fun watching the perspective of someone like this. He doesn't even think about it. A supreme leader, their pope died, and you think that would change their opinion. No, that is what it is. We bombed their pope, and now they want to inflict a loss on us. Their negotiating position is not the same as before this war started.
Hormuz. They know the leverage that is there, so no longer are they only concerned with regime survival. They expect concessions from the United States.
They do.
Again, I feel like that should be getting more attention because all we're seeing in the last few days.
No, I'm surprised that it's only now that he's understanding this. For me, it's from the very beginning, since we bombed the supreme leader. Yes, they're going to want to inflict pain on Trump to make this a loss for him. And the Strait of Hormuz is their means to do that. That's the entire reason for closing the Strait of Hormuz, to wreck the global economy and hurt Trump.
is the talks are about to happen or they're not. We, for a few days, have heard that Vice President Vance is like in the air or that he's already en route to Pakistan. He's not. He's still here in the United States. And earlier today, Iran said, we're not going because the United States has not moved from their maximalist demands and because the blockade is still in effect. Now, digging into this, President Trump just a few moments ago said, quote, based on the fact that the government of Iran is seriously fractured, not unexpectedly so, and upon the request of Field Marshal Asim Munir.
We've already read this, so let's skip forwards.
Now, make no mistake, this is going to be interpreted inside of IRGC circles as the U.S. folding.
Because it is the U.S. folding. Iran said it wasn't even showing up at the negotiations. This is Trump unilaterally extending the ceasefire. It's Trump, it's Taco Tuesday. Trump always chickens out. And it seems to happen a lot on Tuesday.
They're going to present this as President Trump drew a line in the sand. The Iranians would not meet to talk through this, so the United States had to back down.
Exactly.
Now we're kind of having to read between the tea leaves. I will say there's been a lot of hype on the U.S. side in recent days about how a deal is almost done. We're almost there. And then the threats, right? President Trump, within the last 72 hours, Iran better strike a deal by this deadline or else. We're going to go after their energy infrastructure. We're going to go after their bridges. He and Secretary Hegseth have been hammering that home for days. Finally, we come up to the deadline, and instead of strikes, we get a push, an indefinite push of the ceasefire. Now, from the Iranian side,
there's got to be a lot of pressure behind the scenes on Trump for that, from foreign countries, from parts of the administration. But the status quo continuing with Strait of Hormuz closed and blockaded from both sides it's going to kill Trump. He's absolutely finished if he doesn't change status quo. And anything he does to change the status quo finishes him too. Like escalating, Middle East goes up in flames. Surrendering to Iran, he's finished politically. Because there's already a huge amount of pain in the pipeline for the U.S. Average U.S. consumer and or voter. And if the U.S. voter finds out, oh, we lost a war in Iran, we basically surrendered, gave Iran everything they want, they're like, okay, we went to war with Iran to make the situation worse in the Middle East, and now I have all this economic pain. I mean, it won't be popular.
Side, Tasnim News said, quote, despite all of the hype and rumors from the American and from the media and American officials, the Iranian negotiating team has announced to the American side that they will not be present in Pakistan on Wednesday and that there is currently no prospect of participating in the negotiations. This statement was made earlier today. We had all this back and forth, up, down, and sideways for the last 48 hours. It wasn't entirely clear when the ceasefire was going to end. All right, there's like 3 or 4 different times that have been floated out there based off of different announcements that have been made over the course of the last 2 weeks. But everyone generally agreed that today was kind of the final stretch if something was actually going to happen. President Trump earlier this morning said that he was unlikely to extend the ceasefire.
Yes, he did say that.
Well, we're either going to talk or there's going to be new strikes. But then the talks didn't happen. There have been reports that Vice President Vance was already in the air on the way to Pakistan. That clearly wasn't the case. And then from the Iranian side, just a lot of skepticism. A lot of people saying they're not going. It doesn't look like they're moving. And the reasons they gave were the blockade is still in effect. They view that as a violation of the ceasefire and say we're not going to talk with the United States so long as that blockade is still there. Very similar to what they did with the fighting in Lebanon. They said we're not going to talk until the ceasefire is in effect. So the blockade was one. And the second was they said the Americans have not backed down from their excessive demands. And that's an important one because based off of what the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency said just like 6 days ago, it looks like Iran might be looking for more out of these negotiations now than when the war started in the first place. And something tells me that we probably are.
It's amazing to me that some people don't even understand that. Like, we're basically nearly 8 weeks into this conflict, and it's only dawning on some Americans that, oh my God, Iran wants more. We might have to surrender to Iran. It's bad. Yeah, they're only now beginning to realize.
Not entering these talks with the idea of concessions in mind, just based off of all of the rhetoric, all of the ways that this is being presented, you have to assume that we're going into this expecting more than we would have gotten on February 27th. But
that's what Trump wants, because that's what Trump needs for political survival. Even a complete Iranian surrender at this point, with 2 months of the strait being closed, It'd still be a negative for him politically overall because of the economic damage. But it would be survivable if he got a complete Iranian surrender. Without an Iranian surrender, he's finished. Anything else leads to his political irrelevancy and probably impeachment.
It's entirely possible the Iranians view this in a very different light. Now, before diving into that, a quick thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Ground News. So while everyone's been focused on the Middle East, analysts by top and non-perspective blind spot. Matter where, so then all at ground, right? So it's intelligence agent. I don't know why it's flying under the radar. It's very, very important. It's coming from the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, Lieutenant General Adams. So these are not, anonymous, unnamed sources that are familiar with the intelligence process or leaks or hit pieces in various media.
I mean, all you had to know was that the Strait of Hormuz were closed, like right after the Supreme Leader dies, and the United States had no realistic way to get it open, because the only thing that could open it would be a major ground invasion, and that would take at least like 8 or 10 months to set up. So to get together the hundreds of thousands of troops needed to secure the Strait of Hormuz, even if there was political will to do that, would take 8 or 10 months, and by then it's too late. So Iran had the Strait of Hormuz, had the global economy by the balls, and we had no way to change that. So they had all the leverage. They've had all the leverage ever since then. And of course they're going to demand more when they're in such an advantageous position. And the Supreme Leader is killed, they have a reason, very strong reason. If they don't want to be attacked again, they need to inflict a loss on Trump so that no U.S. president ever thinks about attacking Iran again, because they see how disastrous it was for Trump. And they say, okay, we don't want that.
Outlets. This is the head of the DIA. So that is the intelligence arm of the Pentagon. All right. So in front of the House Armed Services Subcommittee on Intelligence and Special Operations on April 16th, so just a couple days ago, he said, quote, Tehran almost certainly expanded its wartime objectives beyond securing the regime's survival to include deterring strikes on Iran and extracting U.S. concessions, primarily by exploiting its control of the Strait of Hormuz. So
absolutely,
essentially, we kind of gave Iran a bit of a present here, where there's always this talk and this speculation of like, what would happen if the strait was closed? What exactly would the response be?
Exactly. We had this discussion like a month ago. That by abolishing the Supreme Leader, we finally gave Iran sufficient justification to close the Strait of Hormuz in a way the world would accept. I mean, Russia, China, they understood. Yeah, you bomb the Supreme Leader, they're going to close the Strait. That's an understandable response, and so we gave them the ability to do something they could have never done before, and now they have leverage over everyone
around the world. And Iran took that step. Dangerous step, no doubt, escalatory step in a lot of ways. And they found out that it's actually pretty easy to close it down. It might actually be a pretty significant revenue generator for them, depending on how this shakes out going forward. And it's in a lot of ways their deterrent, right? They've been looking towards a nuclear weapon was kind of the deterrent of choice.
Exactly. I've said it before. This closing the Strait of Hormuz should have been regarded as equivalent to a nuke in terms of its deterrence value. You bomb the Supreme Leader like Trump did, and they nuke the global economy. That's a pretty good deterrent. It should have been. It should have been a pretty good deterrent. But Trump is an idiot when it comes to the Middle East.
Takes a long time to get there. Take a lot of airstrikes in the process. Shutting down the strait is very easy, and it looks like Iran found out, wait a minute, we can actually ask for more of the United States now than we would have before this war started.
But I will add to that, killing their supreme leader is a big deal for Iran. If you kill, it's equivalent to killing their pope. They're angry. They have just that alone would they'd want to inflict a loss on the United States. And Strait of Hormuz is just a means to the end.
General Adams here continued saying, Iran retains thousands of missiles and one-way attack UAVs that can threaten U.S. and partner forces throughout the region, despite degradations to its capabilities from both attrition and expenditure. He added that Iran will likely further asymmetric warfare advancements to augment its conventional capabilities as it remains in conflict with the United States and Israel. the missile launchers and the missiles and the drones. We've heard, again, all sorts of different assessments from unnamed sources. This is coming directly from the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, thousands of missiles and one-way attack drones. So, how many does it take to shut down the Strait of Hormuz? How many does it take to terrorize our Gulf partners? Less than 1,000, right? So Iran does still, despite the degradation of their military force, does still have significant capabilities. And to that end, the general went on saying that before the 2026 conflict, Iran had attempted to restore its degraded defense and mitigate its military capability shortfalls that were exposed in the 12-day war. He said Iran prepared designated succession plans for military commanders and decentralized command and control, which enabled Tehran to partially mitigate the effectiveness of coalition decapitation strikes. Partially mitigate, right? They took a lot of damage throughout their chain of command. We have a hard time, I think, in this conflict and a lot of conflicts of going in the extremes. Either they have no command and control left at all, or it's entirely intact. What he's getting at is it is probably more intact than we would assume based.
If I was Tehran, I would keep a lot of my high-ranking officers under a mountain. Did they have these missile Sintis? Why leave the mountain? You're under there, you could safe even from a nuke. And having a large part of my control and command infrastructure at some place that's bomb-proof, that would be a smart move. But all the command centers are deep underground.
Based off of how many have been taken out, because leading up to this conflict, they had put in procedures to make sure that if a commander is taken out, his entire command does not just disintegrate. There's a very clear succession of command down the ranks, or maybe even decentralized. So as those strikes come in, they're still able to carry out operations.
Yep.
He added Iran's former supreme leader.
A mosaic command structure where lots of different groups that can act independently.
Maintained his nuclear weapons ban following the 12-day war, despite Iranian officials warning that strikes against Iranian nuclear facilities would cause Tehran to reconsider weaponization. I want to include that because I feel like that is contradictory to a lot of the other assessments that we've heard from the White House and the Pentagon since during the lead up and the execution of this war. He's saying that Iran was not planning on pursuing a nuclear weapon. Again, this is the public testimony in.
Yes, because what Trump is saying publicly, Iran wasn't pursuing a nuke under the old supreme leader that had issued a fatwa against it. They just weren't. There were some parts of Iran society that thought that Iran should have nukes, and that's why they enriched to 60%, because there's no fatwa against enriching to 60%. But that final step to building a nuke, they just wouldn't have done that under the old supreme leader.
Front of Congress just last week. I don't know why this is not getting more attention than it is. And in terms of the Iranian population standing up, he's kind of saying, it's just not going to be a thing. Iranian authorities almost certainly are keenly aware of widespread discontent among the Iranian populace, judging from the volume of celebrations following the former supreme leader's death, and have instituted drastic measures to thwart any attempt at a popular uprising. So I think there were a lot of folks kind of hoping that would be the case in the immediate aftermath of
gambling everything in Trump's case on, there being a regime change.
The opening wave of strikes by the U.S. and Israel. We would see a popular uprising in Iran. It has not materialized yet. There's no indications that it's coming. And the general here saying, look, the Iranian regime has cracked down significantly, even more in the.
Yes, never has a bombing campaign produced regime change anywhere in the world in human history. It hardens the population. Like, as someone who sees that schoolgirl, those schoolgirls killed the first day, the average Iranian has zero tolerance to any bullshit about regime change after that. And any sympathy they had towards reform, whatever, is not now, not when we're under attack. So, the possibility of there being uprising is zero right now.
Wake of the protests in January and February. Now, if we are entering into this new era of a long-term ceasefire, one of the tactics available to the United States is going to be the seizure of Iranian vessels. And we just had another one. The Pentagon put this clip out just a few hours.
Yep. So there's been a second ship seized by U.S. forces, and I don't think it'd be long before China responds and sends warships into the region to escort ships across the U.S. blockade. And I think at that point we back down because we don't want World War III. And we specifically don't want war with China at the same time as war with Iran.
Hours ago, saying overnight, U.S. forces conducted a right of visit, maritime interdiction, and boarding of the stateless, sanctioned MP Tiffany without incident in the Indo-PACOM area of responsibility. As we have made clear, we will pursue global maritime enforcement standards to disrupt illicit networks and interdict sanctioned vessels, providing material support to Iran anywhere they operate. International waters are not a refuge for sanctioned vessels. The Department of War will continue to deny illicit actors and their vessels freedom of maneuver in the maritime domain. And this was actually the second seizure of an Iranian ship carried out by the U.S. Navy in the last 48 hours on April 19th. And we now have footage of this as well. The MV Tuska was interdicted trying to move into the Persian Gulf. So this was one where the U.S. Navy for 6 hours was trying to get them to stop and turn around. They didn't. Eventually, the U.S. warned them, get everybody out of the engine room. They fired on the vessel and then boarded it and took it over. So we know that the Tuska was a sanctioned vessel. It looks like it was heading from China to Iran when it was interdicted by the United States.
U.S. sanctions are going to lose so much of their bite as a result of this conflict. It won't be long before, just people stop respecting them anywhere.
States. We don't know exactly what was on board. In this one, I've already heard there's been speculation that there was dual-use technology or dual-use items. That's very broad, and dual-use means that it could serve a civilian and a military purpose. So that if it was, all missiles, let's say, or all small arms, that's not dual use. That is.
Yes, that would, if it was all missiles and arms, they would have reported that. Dual use means that probably mostly civilian stuff, and that if you really stretched of imagination, some of it could be used for military. I honestly believe that stuff they use for missiles, most of that is probably smuggled in from the north of Iran, where the United States can't intercept, even if it wanted to.
A military shipment moving to Iran. Dual use could be something like chemicals used in ballistic missile fuel, right? Or steel, maybe, that could be used for civilian purposes, of course, but also could be used for military purposes. We'll see where that goes. From my understanding, at this point, there has not been a release of the manifest, and the Marines that were on board are still conducting a search. But if this ceasefire stays in place, again, indefinitely, one of the methods that we should expect to see more of here are the seizures of Iranian ships, not just right outside the Strait of Hormuz and off the Iranian coast, but apparently around the world. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching.
Yeah. And if they keep on seizing ships, the ceasefire won't hold. Iran will begin sending missiles and drones and striking Israel and the Gulf states. So, yeah, we keep boarding ships. The Middle East still going up in flames. So let's have another look at where we're heading in terms of the economy.
Turning now to the economy, and part of the reason that Donald Trump is desperate to wrap things up with Iran. Let's put this up here on the screen. I love this story. Trump says that the energy secretary is, quote, totally wrong on gas prices not dropping to $3 a gallon until next year. President Trump spoke to The Hill on Monday, and he disagreed with the Secretary of Energy, Chris Wright's assessment that gas prices may not drop below $3 per gallon until next year. Quote, no, I think he's wrong on that. Totally wrong. When asked if he believes gas prices will drop, he said, quote, as soon as this ends. Wright had previously told CNN Sunday gas prices may not drop below $3 a gallon until next year amid shipping restrictions in the Straits of Hormuz. I don't know. That could happen later this year. That might not happen until next year. Quote, but prices have likely peaked and they will start to go down. The secretary added, certainly with the resolution of the conflict, you will see gas prices go down. Prices across the board on energy will continue to go down. So gas remains about $4.02 a gallon nationally, remains very high and stabilizing right around probably, I don't know, $3.90, $4 a gallon. But the point of the below $3 gallon is where we all were on February 27th. On February 27th, the day before the war launched, gas was $2.90 a gallon. So the $1 or so increase, where there's likely to be some sort of stabilization, translates into tens of billions of dollars every single month that America must spend on gas than it was not previously. Yeah. And I think that is the most direct consequence. Diesel actually still remains one of those where if you're not a trucker, if you don't work in the industry or any of that, you don't have a full familiarity of the
diesel prices have gone up a lot more than gas prices.
General impact that's having. The margin for many of these independent contracting truckers is getting destroyed. Many businesses already raising prices. If I had a tow truck over the way, I was asking about it, and I was like, "So what's going on with diesel?" And he showed me the receipt. It's a 100-gallon tank, and it's only diesel for this tow truck. So $650. I was
$6 a gallon for diesel.
I was like, so wait, how long does this take? And he's like, well, man, this thing gets $5 to $8 a gallon. And so once a week, depending on the tow job, I was like, once a week at $650 I was like, oh my God. I was like, this is insanity. And he was like, yeah, man. And before the war, it was half of that or something like. I was like, good Lord. So
it was around 3 before the war.
The direct consequence I just gave you of a business where, what do you think he's going to do? He's going to sit there and take it, or are they going to raise a price? It's like, what do you think is going to happen?
It's a very inelastic sort of.
So all our goods moved by truck, diesel trucks in the United States, and a lot of that cost is going to be passed on to us, the consumer.
Right. You have to pay what they say you're going to pay.
Right.
So they're holding your car hostage.
You're so right. Yeah. When you're stuck on the side of the road, you will pay whatever you have to pay to get towed. That is exactly the problem, though. It's a general tax on the entire country. So when we start to think about all of these things, it's very obvious with the economic impact. The also thing that the Energy Secretary is trying to be honest about is, what are we, 6 weeks, 7 weeks, something like that, since hostilities started. That's 6-7 weeks of no
7 weeks, more than 7 weeks, soon 8 weeks.
Oil through the Straits of Hormuz, or I don't know, 5% of the oil that used to come through? That's just not going to cut it. The demand destruction has already began. The natural gas problem in Asia remains catastrophic. There's still so many, like the shortages and all of those things. While there was some delay in the fear over that, it's still happening. It's not like there's been a general resumption of oil flow through the Straits of Hormuz. Helium remains a huge problem. We're okay, apparently, here in the U.S. We're oversupplied. But the rest of the nation, big problem. Fertilizer is already sky high. We already know that. We almost certainly will have higher food prices 6 months to come. And that's if everything ends today, even right now. So, they're delusional whenever it comes to gas.
Did you see the tweet Gollybuff put out trolling where he was saying basically, I mean, his point was basically like, you all are vibe trading, speculation on oil, but there's an underlying reality, which is exactly what Rory Johnson's been telling us the whole time around. And he included in there the Bloomberg terminal code for looking up the Brent crude prices.
Physical price.
So some real inside baseball knowledge there in terms of the financial system. But, there's also increasing signs that Trump, as much as he, blusters publicly and pretends like nothing bothers him and that he, totally knows what he's doing and he's unfazed by all of this, that not just Republicans, but Trump specifically knows he's got big problems here in terms of the economic landscape. We've put B2 up on the screen. This is, they're drawing on reporting here from Politico. You had a Republican analyst who said we're going to get killed in the midterms if the gas prices do not come down. So you can understand why Trump is so sensitive that he goes out and directly says, no, my energy secretary is completely wrong on gas prices, because he knows what a big problem this is. And that was the other thing that really came through from that Wall Street Journal piece that Emily and I talked about yesterday, Sagar. I know.
Yeah, it's the crude prices you see on the exchanges aren't the real crude prices. These real prices are much higher, around 140, 150, and that's the price you pay at the pump. And so gas, and well, actually, it's prices we will be paying at the pump in like a month or so.
You read as well, where Trump was freaking out privately specifically after that one fighter jet was brought down and the 2 airmen were missing. He went on this multi-hour tirade that was so insane he had to be shut out of the room while his aides gathered and tried to figure out, okay, what's the plan? So the commander-in-chief was so unhinged, he had to be completely shut out of those conversations. And he also privately is asking people, you know, how they think this is going and worrying aloud
Is going very badly, Mr. President.
About the comparison with Jimmy Carter and the way that the Iranian hostage crisis just completely nuked him. I mean, his presidency was already not going well in terms of, you know, reality and the public perception, but that the Iranian hostage crisis was just the death of him.
Without this Iran war, his second presidency could have been a success. It's this war alone is dragging him down.
From a political perspective. And Trump is apparently talking about that privately to his aides. So he knows this is a major problem.
He should be, because it is very 70s-esque. And a lot, look, you know, His Very Best, that's the book, biography of Jimmy Carter. I recommend everybody go read it, because all anybody really knows about Carter is what happened with
Malays,
Iran. It's a complicated, long story. Allow me to tell you a little bit of thing called the Panama Canal Treaty, which everybody forgets now, and people literally lost their Senate seats over. But the point is that for a multi-year period, there was hit after hit after hit. We've kind of accelerated that for a one-year timeline. Trump was already dramatically unpopular before the war. This is kind of pushing things over the edge, but it is Carter-esque in terms of that's what will become the...
No, he wasn't popular, but not historically unpopular. It was just... It wasn't something that unrecoverable before the war.
Defining legacy, but there were a lot of things that fed into the lack of trust from the country over these issues and with the war to make it so that when that does happen, you are massively unpopular. And, you know, again, look, people have accused people of pointing these things out as like crisis monger or fear mongering or any of that. I just think it's a responsibility to warn people. Like what I just talked about with the tow truck guy and diesel, that's happening. That is a thing. That's 1 month. How many months can somebody sit there and take it? Let's put the next one up here. Very interesting piece from Bloomberg. The cumulative global impact of the 7-week war is beginning to emerge in the coming week. They specifically point to all of these different indexes which track.
Yeah, the delay between the Strait of Hormuz closing and its impact on the global economy. So just now, the beginning, it's beginning to have its impact, but over the next 2-3 months, it'll fully play out. And things are start getting bad really fast.
Track inflation specifically for manufacturing. And you can already see that in many of them, that the composite PMI, manufacturing PMI, services PMI, many of them are beginning to spike. And actually we saw some of the very beginnings of some of this for stagflation that happened just in the last month data. But really, I think where you have to look is just at the OPEC number from last month, 27% reduction. Put B4 next on the screen, please, because this just makes it very, very clear. The world is now in the biggest energy crisis in history, 600 million barrels of lost oil supply. The gas prices are up 47% since December. Inflation is at 4% in a similar path in the 1970s. There you go. I mean, it doesn't take a genius really to figure out where things are going to go from here. The same oil shock in the 1970s is really what propelled the U.S. economy into problems that lasted for, I'm forgetting when the recession ended in the 80s, maybe 82, 83. It took a long time, right? Even with the resumption of Reagan after the whole hostage crisis and all of that was solved. And the reason why is because the amount of like dried up capital, the spreading effects of stagflation, interest rates, it really froze everybody, and it also scarred a generation forever. And I think our generation will be very similar to the 1970s generation who had to live through those very high periods of inflation. It's not one-to-one, obviously, in terms of the numbers, but we've lived through it now for many years. We've had high inflation since 2021. We've simultaneously, though, somehow we've also had booming corporate profits and, you know, the rich getting phenomenally much richer. So it's much more of a generational conflict.
Yes, 1973 here. That's the last time there was an oil crisis. And we had got this spiral of inflation out of it. We're heading for the same thing. See, it go up, you can sort of see like a curve like this. Yeah, we're heading for that. We're going to have another real spike of inflation really soon. I mean, not surprising, worst energy crisis in history.
unique in its own way. But I think that the big economic story for me is just Asia.
Yeah.
I don't think they will ever forgive us for what we have done to them.
Well, and Asia is also kind of a preview.
I mean, this is going to turn the entire world against the United States, and therefore accelerate de-dollarization. I actually have one story that I'll go into after that shows you what I mean by dollarization and why it's a big deal that it's going to slowly stop.
Of where the rest of the world is going to be headed if this crisis is not ended, this Trump-created crisis is not ended. They are hit hardest first. Then it's likely to spread into Africa too, by the way. Then it's likely to spread to Europe. And then finally, I mean, we're already seeing some impacts here, but in terms of the worst impacts, we do have some insulation, which is kind of, kind of gross given that we're the ones that created the problem. But in any case, let's put this New York Times article up on the screen. This is B5 talking about how screwed Asia already is. They say the forces of scarcity hitting Asia may soon spread across the world. The Asia Pacific was hit hard and quick by the war in Iran in its energy bottlenecks. Scenes of crisis there indicate the problems are multiplying and spreading. You have one senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center who's based in Sri Lanka, who said the impacts are so rapid and deep. Just from a magnitude perspective, this is really very, very, very large. They go in and document some of the specific problems, starting with, there's been already 92,000 flights canceled worldwide.
92,000 flights canceled worldwide. And that's coming to Europe. Europe has like 5 weeks of jet fuel left. And then you're going to have mass cancellation of flights there too.
That is double the pre-war rate of cancellation. The largest spike in eliminated flights is linked to the Asia Pacific, and that is because of this issue of scarcity of jet fuel. We even have, actually Air Canada had to cancel flights into New York City from, I think it was Toronto to New York City, because of this jet fuel shortage. So we are already seeing some of those effects here.
So prices of any airline ticket are going to be exploding over the summer.
Not to mention airline prices. If you go and try to buy a ticket now, it's likely to be much more expensive than if you had bought it before the war. I'm seeing, things on Twitter about people who are struggling to be able to afford to go to a funeral or a wedding or things that they had hoped to be able to attend. And that is amplified and magnified in Asia. You've also had...
Oh, it would really suck to have a wedding during this time and no one can come because there's no jet fuel.
Halted production. They say many of Asia's most successful export industries require enormous amounts of energy and other ingredients from the Middle East. 7 weeks in, stockpiles are running out. Cutbacks in manufacturing are now multiplying, revealing vulnerabilities rarely considered. Copper and nickel production, for example, rely on high heat from natural gas and also sulfur. Both are in short supply, forcing several Indonesian nickel processors to reduce output by at least 10%. And those are some of the knock-on effects that, as a layperson, you don't necessarily see at the surface level. We all know that, obviously energy is really critical to a whole lot of things. So much of our imports come from Asia. If they're cutting back, well, that is going to have knock-on effects. Obviously, it's huge effects for them directly, but knock-on effects for us and for the rest of the world. So that impact is already here. And then you also have, a huge number of people that are at risk now of falling into poverty. They say a UN report estimates 8.8 million people in Asia and the Pacific are at risk of falling into poverty because of the war, depending on how long hostilities last. And part of that problem, too, Sagar, as you were talking before, is the issue with fertilizer, shortages in fertilizer coming at a critical time during planting season. And you've got, vulnerable people around the world who are going to be facing prices that they simply cannot afford. Put B6 up on the screen because that speaks to the looming food crisis
Global food crisis. Yep, another one. Last one was in 2010. And you remember that's when there were riots in Egypt and across the Middle East. Another one coming soon, next year.
This is from the Financial Times. They say hunger and even famine are foreseeable consequences of the war in Iran. Now the world must act to shield the poorest from...
more people are going to die as a result of the Strait of Hormuz closing than if Iran converted all its nuclear material into like 6 nukes and used them all. Yes, that would kill a lot of people, but more people are going to starve than would be killed by the nuclear weapons that Iran had. it's going to be much, much bigger. So worrying about Iran's nuke is just idiotic. If it triggers a closure of Strait of Hormuz that kills more people globally than any nuke could ever do. Anyway, this will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe. Come watch on Kick or Twitch. And I'll see you next video. Bye.